Hi, my name's Tanner, and today I'm going to be talking with you about Chapter 16, which covers home video. Now, the cool thing about home video is it's one of those technologies that truly has impacted all of our lives in one way or another. It also has drastically shifted the way that Americans view entertainment. This presentation would talk with you about the history of home video, as well as the progress that it's made over the years, and then also where it's going in the future. So we'll start off on slide 2. There are three aspects of home video. The first is delivery, which deals with the way that programming is transmitted to the audience. Second, recording, which involves the filming and storage of information so that it can be transmitted back to the viewer at a later time. And third would be display, which covers the way that the audience takes in the content that is being transmitted. Now, surprisingly, even though there's been major shifts in technology and major advances, the process is generally still the same. TV stations still broadcast pre-recorded information into our homes that we get to watch every day. So we'll start off with the first aspect, which is delivery. In 1941, the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, was enacted and began to award TV licenses to stations who in turn began to broadcast their networks nationwide. Now, we all know December 1941 was the infamous attack on Pearl Harbor, which in turn thrust the United States into its involvement in World War II. Now, during the war, there generally wasn't much technological advancement in terms of the home front, particularly within TV. So everything kind of stayed stagnant during the war years. Now, before the war, there were a couple of TV licenses that had been awarded. However, by the end of the war in 1948, only 6 stations were left broadcasting. Soon, however, after the war, the FCC decided it was time to really pick up speed again and completely revamped their transmitting system by adding electronic encoding. There was also a huge rush by people who wanted to apply and get new TV licenses, and the FCC just honestly became inundated with all that new information. So, in the same year, they actually introduced a freeze on all new applications that lasted until 1952. They also realized with all the new applications that their old VHF, or very high frequency system, was just not going to be enough to handle all of the new stations that were applying to be on air. And they knew that was something that they were going to have to tackle down the road. In 1952, as the freeze was lifted, the FCC introduced UHF, or ultra high frequency. However, there were some major drawbacks associated with this new technology. Ultra high frequency required a second tuner to be added to TV sets, and new antennas were often needed to deal with the higher frequency. Because of this, UHF stations really felt like they'd been given second-class status below VHF. People were also very reluctant to pay the extra money required for the new equipment, and UHF stations just kind of stayed at a second-rate status. It wasn't until 1965 that the FCC forced all TV manufacturers to start including both UHF and VHF tuners on all of its television sets. But even then, it still took years before the two were on a generally equal playing field. Then in 1953, color television was added. Luckily, with this technology, the FCC really learned from some of their past mistakes, as color signal was added to the existing luminescence system. This meant that the color broadcasts were still totally compatible with the old black and white TV sets. This idea is called reverse compatibility, and it's something that manufacturers should really keep in mind as they're introducing new technology into the marketplace. Now on the slide, I have two pictures. The one on the right is actually an accessory UHF converter box that someone would have had to buy in order to receive UHF stations. And the dials actually had to be tuned much more carefully than the older VHF, which would just kind of click into place. The UHF, you had to tune slower, and a lot of people complained about lack of quality signal. Then on the left side of the screen, we have NBC's iconic peacock logo. It was introduced in 1953 as just kind of a bragging point for color television. It really wanted to take advantage of the new technology and show off what there was and how technology was improving. We'll move on to the next slide. So from 1941 until 1949, really the only way to receive transmission from TV stations was through the use of a TV antenna. In 1949, cable was introduced as another mode of delivery, but it really didn't catch on until the 1980s. And even then, some rural areas still didn't receive quality service. Actually, I remember my grandparents had a television set that still relied on a set of rabbit ears way up until they decided to switch over to satellite. In the 1970s, cable did try and make itself a little bit more enticing to consumers by adding specific cable programming. During the 1970s, shows like MASH were introduced, and the 1970s also saw the beginning of a widespread sports broadcasting. 1992, the Cable Television Consumer Protection Act was enacted, allowing multi-channel service growth. And then from 1996, satellite delivered programming was initiated. And so between the years of 1996 and 2014, the number of satellite delivered programming networks grew from 145 to well over 900. And today, satellite really is the predominant mode of transmission. We'll move on to the second aspect, which is recording. In 1956, a company called Ampex introduced videotape technology. The first videotape recorder was actually the size of a double refrigerator, and it used 2-inch wide magnetic tape. An hour of recording could actually weigh up to 30 pounds on the reel. Now, if you go back to the previous slide, you can actually see a picture of one of those original Ampex recorders. They were massive. In 1977, a more practical form of home recording was introduced, the VCR. The VCR used 1/2-inch wide tape housed in a protective plastic case that allowed users to record TV shows from home. They were, however, astronomically expensive. If you look at the advertisement I have on the screen, that Zenith produced in 1977 cost $995. They were also incredibly loud, but they were insanely popular, and by 1984, 40% of all U.S. households had a VCR. Now, I'm a little younger, but the VHS was the only form of cassette that was available when I was growing up. However, that wasn't the case back in the early 80s. There was actually an intense battle that lasted between Sony's Betamax and JVC's VHS. Now, the formats were completely non-compatible. In other words, you couldn't play a VHS tape in a Betamax machine. It just wouldn't work. It wouldn't actually fit. And for a time, video stores sold both formats. In the end, however, JVC's product was way lighter, way cheaper, and used VHS format tapes that could hold a 2-hour-long movie instead of Betamax 1-hour time limit. And really, that was the nail that kind of sealed the coffin for Betamax. So those people who bought into the Betamax technology back in the 80s were left with a worthless piece of junk. All right, moving on to the next slide. Also, during the 1980s, RCA and NCA Philips kind of partnered together to introduce the video disc. Now, the video disc, its premise was basically based off of a 33.5-inch LP record. They were cumbersome, they were fragile, and they really just couldn't hold much information at all. Therefore, the format never really caught on. Then in 1997, DVD was introduced. As opposed to the video disc, the DVD was based off of the compact disc, which had been introduced in the mid-1980s. DVD could store way more content and allowed for more features to be added, such as bonus tracks and interactive features. Then, in 1999, DVR was introduced. DVR relied on built-in memory, and because of its non-linear format, DVR is able to record and play back at the exact same time, giving the apparent ability to pause and even rewind live TV. And then in 2001, Blu-ray and HD DVD came out as well, and similar to the Betamax and VHS battles of the early 1980s, Blu-ray and HD DVD underwent some strenuous competition between each other. Blu-ray, however, did end up winning just because it, again, could hold more content and more information. As they were battling, both groups worked exclusively with film studios, and in 2008, Warner Brothers switched from HD DVD to Blu-ray, which really dealt the last death blow for HD DVD. All right, so the last aspect, the third aspect, is display. Now, the original television set is truly a television set because it includes both tuners to interpret the signal and a monitor to display the signal. They took the country by storm. In 1975, 90% of all American households had a television set, and 66% of them considered them a necessity. So we've discussed the two parts of a television set, the tuner and then the monitor. The monitors of the original television sets used what's called a cathode ray tube, or CRT. The screen area of a CRT is covered with lines of phosphors that corresponded to the picture element, what we would just today call pixels in the image. Color monitors use 3 streams of electrons, one for each color channel: red, green, and blue. The phosphors would glow when struck by a stream of electrons sent from the back of the television set. The greater the stream, the brighter the phosphors glow, and the glowing phosphors would combine to form an image. The first color television set required 525 lines of resolution. Since then, advances in technology have allowed for more pixels, creating a smoother, clearer image. In the digital age, an SD TV would have at least a minimum of 480 lines of resolution. HD would have between 720 and 1080, and ultra high definition would have the minimum of 2160. There has been further development, of course. Believe it or not, you can still buy a CRT television set. They are still available. However, you would be hard-pressed to find a wide selection in any electronics store. LCD, or liquid crystal display, really has taken over the advertisement market. They have a brighter picture, and they oftentimes, just tend to be more attractive. They're narrower. They do have a smaller viewing angle, however. LCD has 2 subcategories, LED and OLED, which are variations on how the LCD create the light necessary to produce the picture. There is also the plasma option, which have a wider viewing angle, but oftentimes have a way more reflective screen, which in turn reflects objects and images from the room. The original television sets had 30 frames per second. However, newer television sets have new algorithms that can adapt to different frame rates. As consumers become more reliant on cable and satellite TV, what they're really purchasing is the monitor, while the tuner has become an external accessory, kind of like a cable box. All right, on to the next slide. According to Pew Research, 15% of Americans have cut the cord and have abandoned cable satellite services completely. Services like CBS, Netflix, HBO, Google, and Amazon have created a more competitive market since these services, and are far cheaper than the original cable service, and provide comparable programming. These changes have created a shift in how companies advertise, and soon the potential TV commercial like we know today could become an obsolete mode of advertising. So, what does the future look like? In less than a century, the way that Americans have viewed TV has changed drastically in almost every aspect. This leaves people to ask, what is the future of this medium? Every day it seems like there's new and more exciting home video technologies hitting the market. The industry is beginning to witness and is attempting to keep up with multiple viewing platforms as Americans have available to them today. It's going to be exciting to see which platform and which modes of delivery will reign victorious in the next 78 years. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.